This is the Leadership in Insurance podcast, brought to you by FinPro Search Partners.
Insurance companies are businesses and they need to look for the long term and be sustainable.
We went from 0 to 1 and now it's going from 1 to 100.
Insurance as a concept, as a kind of service, is brilliant. The execution is what we're looking at now.
I think the companies that are going to succeed are the ones that are going to understand and master the art of intent.
When we talk about innovation, we lean too heavily to think about technology and we don't think about creating a culture of innovation. I think innovation is essentially continuous improvement of existing processes and platforms and product.
Right? It's got to be easy. It's got to be seamless.
Good morning and welcome to the Leadership in Insurance Emerging Tech Series podcast. I'm your host, Gavin Savage, and today I am very lucky to be joined by the co-founder and CTO of Newfront, Gordon Wintrob. Gordon, welcome. How are you doing?
Thanks, Gavin. Doing well, and thanks so much for having me. It's really great to be here.
Yeah, excited to do this one, and I know you're a busy man, so I do appreciate your time. Gordon, we've got a lot to cover on this episode, but yeah, a great place to start is I guess a proper introduction from you. I'll introduce you very briefly. It'd be great if you could introduce yourself and the Newfront business.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Gordon Wintrob. I'm the co-founder and chief technology officer at Newfront. At Newfront, we're building the modern insurance brokerage. So we really focus on building a software platform that supercharges the brokers on our team. We started the company back in July of 2017. So we're coming up on 7 years now. And we've scaled really rapidly. So today in early 2024, we have over 800 employees all across the US. We transact about $3 billion in premiums annually. We really have a specialty in tech and life sciences. So we work with about 20% of all US unicorns, so companies valued at over $1 billion valuation. But we also have experts in lots of other industries, construction, real estate, manufacturing. These have been big growth areas for us over the past couple of years as the insurance markets have been changing.
Awesome. Thank you. It's been quite some growth for you and the team in Newfront over the past 7 years, as you say. Pre-Newfront, I'm always interested in the whole picture. Would you kindly mind taking us back to the beginning of your journey into tech as a whole, and walking us through the path that led you to founding an insurance brokerage in Newfront?
Yeah, sure thing. So I've been into computers my whole life. It's kind of been an obsession. It started with getting one of those Texas Instrument calculators when I was, probably 10 years old or so. And when I realized that you could program it and make video games, then I was off to the races. I studied computer science at MIT, and after that I came to the Bay Area. Just felt like this is where it's the center of the universe, right? This is where tech is. And I started another company that went through an accelerator program called Y Combinator. And that was back in 2014. And it was a great experience, great way to meet a lot of amazing people. And we ended up actually selling that business to LinkedIn. So I spent a few years at LinkedIn working on their jobs product. So building an aggregator to collect jobs data from all over the web and create millions of job postings on LinkedIn. And, it was when I was there that kind of starting to think about what to do next. That was actually when I ended up starting Newfront. And you might be wondering, why insurance, right? It's kind of I think it's a bit of an ugly duckling, right? It's kind of an industry that's been living under a rock. And I actually grew up around the insurance industry. So my dad worked at AIG for many years, and that was my exposure to insurance growing up.
Interesting. And was Newfront a YC company?
Yeah. We went through YC in 2018. So I have the rare privilege of going through YC twice with two different companies, but it's a good experience both times.
I was going to say, it must be part of the furniture now.
Yeah, that's right.
But that's the reason I kind of knew that, but you just missed that the company previous to LinkedIn was YC, and yeah, the it must have been at the time. Kind of think about it, I've only had one other insurtech on that was part of the YC. That must have been one of the first, maybe the first insurance or insurtech company on the YC program. Maybe not, but
Well, there have definitely been others. I think
and others.
what made us unique at the time was that, our approach of really believing that the broker is very important, thinking about how can we empower the insurance professional. I think at the time, this is back in 2017, there were a lot of companies that were thinking, how do we disintermediate? How do we get rid of the broker? They're a middle
Yeah.
person. And I think it was very much a contrarian approach to say, hey, we actually think that this person's really important. They have these amazing relationships with their clients, and we think they've been really underserved by technology. We want to build a platform that helps them really have a much better experience at work and deliver a better experience to their clients.
Mm. Yeah, and I think at the time that was part of the big kind of D2C movement within insurance, less about the brokerage. And now flip it to 2024, that's very much the trend at the moment. I think we see a lot of mergers and acquisitions and sales in the kind of broker agent space. So yeah, way ahead of your time in some ways. And I'm always interested in I guess, the origin or genesis from, well, maybe you've kind of half answered that, and that your dad was working for AIG. You've always had exposure to it, maybe been aware of the problems, but the story of how you met your co-founders, I was interested in, and I guess the post LinkedIn, what made this venture your why in terms of founding and trying to innovate within the brokerage space.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, I'd kind of grown up just hearing about insurance around the dinner table. And I always saw it as this massive thing. Like I remember, going on a trip to Asia and seeing these, huge skyscrapers that said AIG. I just felt like it touched every part of the economy. And so when I was at LinkedIn, I met my co-founder Spike just through a mutual friend, and he said, "Hey, you're the only two people I know who are interested in insurance." Such a weird thing. And Spike's background, he was at Blackstone. He had to buy insurance for some of their portfolio companies, and then he was on the founding team of a company called Open Door, and he was their head of finance. So he had to help them with a lot of their commercial insurance needs. And we started brainstorming, and we wanted to just better understand the market, and we would bounce ideas off my dad, and he was the one who said, "Look, brokers dominate this industry. It's all about the insurance expert. You should just go spend time with them." And so we did a lot of interviews. We would just cold call or cold email brokers and say, "Hey, we want to buy you coffee and sit behind your desk and just see what a day in the life is like." And they're kind of like, no one's ever asked me about that, but that's kind of weird, but sure. And I remember there was kind of this light bulb moment. There was this one broker named Jerry, who's just kind of a small mom and pop, worked at a small mom and pop brokerage in downtown San Francisco. And I remember just seeing, what's a typical morning like for Jerry, and it was a dumpster fire. It was like a client call comes in. He has this like challenging conversation with a client who was going to submit a claim, and so he's kind of talking through the strategy, and then he gets off the phone, and behind the scenes he's created this like Rube Goldberg machine where he gets out like the claim intake notes folder, and he like writes some notes and he hands it to his assistant who enters that into the system. And it was just so clear that, the 20 minutes on the phone with the client was super valuable, but then the next 40 minutes behind the scenes was just a waste of time and something that, any data entry person could do. And it was very clear, wow, we could build something that makes this whole thing a lot better.
Mm. And kind of fast forwarding, I was stalking you on LinkedIn a little bit ahead of this podcast, and one of the kind of accolades, which is, I guess, more of an honor, in the grand scheme of things, doesn't mean huge amount, but it's a great honor, in terms of being a YC top company associated with names like Airbnb and Coinbase. I'll probably guess the answer to this, but did you anticipate the kind of scale and impact that Newfront would have when you first embarked on this journey? Like, Did you feel like it could get to the levels that it's gotten to, or how do you feel about the achievements kind of going back 7 years to the day?
Um, I appreciate the question. I think it's definitely a little bit surreal day to day.
Yeah.
Especially having such an amazing team of, hundreds of colleagues who have a lot more experience, a lot more knowledge than me, and just kind of seeing the things that they can accomplish, which is stuff that, me and Spike never would have been able to do early on. It's, I love that. I love seeing, um, the team kind of just cranking on all cylinders. Um, so it is a little surreal. But that being said, we're just getting started. Feels like we have still a lot of opportunity ahead of us.
Mm. And you talked about sitting down with uh, brokers, and I think that aspect of getting the feedback and seeing day to day of Jerry as an example.
Mhm.
Um, do you feel like the time that you entered the market is maybe one of the big reasons as to why you became so big? Sometimes it's, yes, not just about timing, of course, there's more to it than that, but like, what do you think it is that has been the reason for the brokers for basically Newfront in this space to have taken off? Is it down to what do you think it is, technology? Like, what's your take on why it's just went over the last 7 years?
Yeah, I do. I do think that we definitely made a contrarian bet that was the right one in 2017, and that really helped us grow rapidly. This idea of
Yeah.
attracting the best insurance talent and combining them with the best technologists, makes something really special. Um, in terms of why people join us, I think it's really two things. I think one is the technology. It's the idea that, they're used to working on these legacy systems that are often private equity owned and
Mm.
really crummy. I mean, nothing like what you experience in, really any other part of the back office. Um, and then the other piece that I think we maybe undervalued early on or didn't really fully appreciate is culture. I think in Silicon Valley, the idea of building a very much a sort of mission-driven organization that treats its employees really well and thinks about, what is the impact we're having on the world. That's maybe a little bit more commonplace. And I would say in other industries, maybe outside of the Bay Area, people don't focus on that as much. And so building a place where people actually want to come to work and do some of the best work of their careers, that's a pretty powerful thing. That becomes a big compounding advantage over time as you bring more and more talent to Newfront.
Mm. What do you think the greatest levers have been for you in terms of, from a technology standpoint, to the business's success? You mentioned a couple of things as to why people join Newfront, and technology being one of the things. When you kind of look again over the past few years, like, what do you think those levers have been from a technology standpoint that have really stood out to the market?
Um, well, it's interesting. When we started, we were very much focused internally, thinking about building our platform. We call it a system of action. So it's the idea
Mm.
that it's not just a system of record where you're kind of keeping track of things in a filing cabinet. It's actually a system of action where you're, doing actions in the platform. And so if you think about within, our business insurance practice, we've mapped out hundreds of these workflows, everything from the processing a broker record letter, uh, gathering loss runs from different carriers, submitting a quote to an insurer. Um, we've mapped out all these different processes and streamlined them in the product. I think what we've found is that's less of a lever for attracting talent. Like it's great. It helps us operate more effectively and deliver a more consistent, higher quality experience. But I think what people get excited about is what are we actually doing for our clients? So things that gets in front of our clients and gives them a better experience when they're dealing with insurance, which normally is kind of the last thing on their list and something that they're not too excited to spend time on.
Mm. And we discussed on off camera some things we talk about, and I think for me, when we talk about kind of an insurance or insurtech, technologies get hyped up a little bit in terms of what they can and cannot help insurers or from brokers to carriers what they can achieve. When we think about AI in the context of insurance, the breakthrough in AI, generative AI, ChatGPT in the last 12 months, has been quite something to watch. But from an insurance perspective, personally, I feel there is obvious limitations as to where we can go with it right now. But that breakthrough in AI from your side and at Newfront, how is that fundamentally changing in some way what Newfront is building for insurance going forward, or is it simply just advancing what you wanted to do, quicker?
It's a good question. I think what you're getting at is that distinction between, is it kind of accelerating what you're already doing, or are you doing something brand new,
Yeah.
different? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's what's kind of cool is the answer is it's doing both. We did a hackathon in early 2023, and we said, hey, there's so much cool stuff happening with AI. This is the AI hackathon. Like everything has to be AI related. And what we found is that in some parts of our roadmap, it was an accelerant. It was kind of like, hey, we previously had a certain way of parsing quote documents, but now we think that we can expand that to 10 times the number of document types and do it way faster and have it just be way more comprehensive in what we're parsing out of those documents. So it helped us, kind of run faster at that problem. But in other areas, it's really given us, it's helped us build new products for clients that we never had before. So like one really good example is in our employee benefits business, we've built an AI-powered chatbot called our Benefits Assistant. And so this lives in our client Slack instances, and it answers employee questions. So if an employee has a question of anything HR or benefits related, that chatbot is trained on their specific benefits program and all of those documents, and it can answer questions. So it unlocks a client-facing experience that we never would have had without generative AI.
What I kind of liked about those examples is that they're very specific in terms of where you can apply AI. Sometimes I think when we talk about what AI can do across the whole insurance piece, I think we overestimate what it can do, but I think we underestimate how powerful it can be for one specific thing. Like you mentioned a few examples there, like with regards to Gen AI, how that can change the broking space. Like I always just kind of think to myself from a day-to-day perspective, in the life of a broker, what Gen AI can actually do to change their day-to-day and impact the broker, the end customer, and the insured. Because again, I'm probably somewhat cynical about how much it can achieve in the insurance space right now, given we're so risk averse and there is still a bit of tabooness to using AI and letting it go wild within the insurance space. Do you have any kind of thoughts on examples of how, as I say, Gen AI can change the kind of day-to-day of a broker, given that you work so closely with them?
Yeah, I mean, really, if you think about there's so many workflows within an insurance brokerage. And I guess if I start by just kind of zooming out and think about how do we sort of model the brokerage, it's really this data processing factory, right? Where you have unstructured data about risk. That's on one side. That's, information from our clients about what kind of businesses do they operate? What are their revenues? How many employees do they have? Where are they based? That sort of thing. And then on the other side of this factory, you have the insurance markets, which are also dealing with all sorts of unstructured data. And, it's our job to kind of take in information on one side, translate it, and repackage it so that the other side can do something useful with it, and then go back and forth. And generative AI makes that translation process way, way faster. It's really good at seeing just a few examples and being able to learn, oh, I understand how when a client is talking about this sort of thing, what they really mean is like they need this kind of limit over here. And like for example, parsing those quote documents or loss runs, which are really just lists of claims, it's really good at being able to deal with that sort of unstructured data.
Mm. In terms of kind of Gen AI and LLMs, is there a fundamental difference in the two for you?
Well, generative AI is kind of this, uh, maybe kind of new wave of innovation that
Yeah.
I do think is um, pretty revolutionary in just how quickly it's changing and how it's really bringing the cost of intelligence down really rapidly, right? I mean, if you've played with ChatGPT at all over the past year, it's suddenly you have this, what started off as kind of a toy is now like maybe a pretty good intern, and you really
Yeah.
see it improving. And it's like, wow, if you draw that trajectory and think about where it's heading, it's gonna get pretty wild. Um, that being said, there's still more traditional AI approaches uh, that are really powerful in the brokerage context. So one good example, um, we deal with a lot of D&O, directors and officers insurance,
Mhm.
and we've actually built an ML model that helps our clients predict what sort of D&O exposure might they have, what sort of claims might they see in the upcoming year. And that's not using generative AI, it's using more traditional ML techniques.
Yeah.
But it's something where, when a broker is going and presenting that to a CFO or general counsel, they're not talking so much about the AI or what's the underlying AI technology. They're saying, hey, we've been able to predict what we think your losses might look like. How might we want to change the program structure? Do you maybe need additional limits? Is there maybe an opportunity for cost savings? So it's more about helping bringing some transparency and some data to clients in a way that they haven't gotten before.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really probably a basic question, but the reason I ask is that I sometimes decipher between the two from an insurance perspective. I kind of look at, I've said this before, kind of look at Gen AI as the tortoise and sorry, the hare, and I look at LLMs as the tortoise potentially. But I feel like Gen AI is now, from an insurance perspective, it's allowed the industry to see where AI can be applicable. But I do think the advancements of LLMs is the thing that's going to benefit the insurance space the most, if that makes sense. But in terms of kind of moving on to another area, when it comes to obviously you guys in insurtech, 7 years, I think we're quite obsessed by talking about an insurance, incumbents versus startups. Incumbents,
Mhm.
who's going to win, and I don't necessarily. I definitely don't think that. I think it is an ecosystem partnership, but if we were speaking competitively, do you feel like in terms of insurance incumbents, are you seeing much on your side in terms of how they are ever increasing that, ever increasing the use of the LLM models to gain a competitive advantage over startups, or do you just see it again as being a bit of an equalizer between the two?
I definitely think it's something that where incumbents have the advantage. The reality is, insurance brokerages like Newfront have just a treasure trove of data, right? Just years of data that can help train and fine tune models, um, and definitely gives us an advantage. That being said, I think that maybe the more traditional incumbents, the ones that have just been doing it the same old way for
Yeah.
decades, are in a tough spot because they might not even have a system, or they have a system that's very poorly implemented where it's kind of just a dumping ground for a bunch of different files and they can't really make sense of it. I mean, we have competitors who, remember at the start of COVID, they had things locked away in filing cabinets and they had to have employees, rush into the office and unscrew filing cabinets off the walls. And so,
Wow.
even if they theoretically have a data advantage, it's really hard for them to deal with that sort of ecosystem and getting that information into the LLMs in a way that's useful for them.
Mm. And the carriers or incumbents that are adopting that digital first mentality, like how is it or why is it do you feel they potentially do have an advantage over the startups in harnessing the AI and other elements of emerging technologies?
Yeah, well, these models are really good intelligence engines. Like they can take sort of anything you throw at them and sort of make sense of it, but their general purpose, right? If you use ChatGPT, it can answer questions about whatever you want.
Mm,
And they don't have that sort of domain specific information that's not publicly available around the insurance industry and insurance data model. When I think about our platform, what makes it so powerful is we have the expert in the loop, right? If this expert is working in a system of action and taking actions and processing different client requests, they're able to kind of oversee what's happening. So an
yeah.
LLM might make a suggestion and say, oh, like, as you drag in this document, we've parsed out the limit information. And the expert might say, oh, like, this is right, but actually the way that you've built the tower here, that's not what I expected, and they'll make a change. And so with every transaction, right, thousands and thousands of quotes, thousands and thousands of policies flowing through our platform, we're getting better and better, better structured data that can be used to make the AI even smarter and deliver a better client experience.
Mm. I mean, how do you kind of feel generally about AI at the moment? Do you feel like it is something that, in terms of ChatGPT, because you're right, a year ago, ChatGPT came out, it completely transformed the way people think about AI and where it is. I mean, I use it day to day, it is literally like an assistant to me. It's a fantastic tool, but how do you feel generally where we are as with AI at the moment? Do you feel comfortable with it? Do you feel maybe a little bit scared? I don't know, but just always kind of interested for people like yourself who are so embedded in it, and particularly yourself being in the Bay Area, as you say, it's the kind of epicenter of tech. Like, what's your general consensus on it at the moment?
Well, personally, I'm definitely an optimist. I'm excited about new technologies. I mean, I think the the opportunities in insurance and really every part of the economy are just insane. I think that we're going to see this is just a step function change in innovation. Um, I, I also recognize that there are a lot of challenges. I kind of think about it like, with every technology, every new technology, there's some, kind of malicious usage. I think about
Mm,
like, when man created fire, well, then you had the opportunity for arson, right? Which never would have
yeah.
existed before. And I think there's going to be a lot of crazy stuff from LLMs for the insurance industry, and kind of speaking less abstract and more specific. Um, I do think we need to figure out a lot of the challenges around data governance and privacy.
Mhm.
Like with that benefits assistant that we're building, it works really nicely for kind of general purpose benefits questions that an employee might ask, like, hey, I need to buy a new pair of prescription sunglasses. What's the deductible? No one you'd feel happy if that was out publicly on the internet.
Mhm.
On the flip side, though, if you had a question, maybe you're going through a difficult divorce or you have mental health challenges or some other reason why um, you need help from your HR team or your employee benefits, thinking through, well, how should the model reply to those situations? How do you make sure that data isn't getting shared between people who shouldn't have access to it? There's going to be a lot of challenges in data privacy and security.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, and I think as a specific example, that's always going. I think that will forever be the challenge, and it's just how we overcome that. Down to I think the regulations certainly across the EU make for it for insurance companies to adopt more. However, and I think that's always going to be a challenge. But the reticence, I sometimes feel like, and it's just a feeling, it's not based on anything, but I don't know if you managed to see the new, I forget the name of it, the text to video converter. Have you seen it at Sora?
Oh yeah,
ChatGPT.
text to video.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, amazing tool, but it's kind of like when people. So we think about, I think it's too specialty a role, underwriters, claims specialists. I don't think it can. I'm not one of those people that thinks it can replace those people. However, when you see stuff like that coming out, I just feel like that reticence to continuing to adopt and train it and update the models and go all in for AI. I just sometimes wonder if there is a bit of reticence because it just seems incredibly, staggeringly clever and quick at learning. So therefore, is it trying to control AI, as opposed to really opening the floodgates to it, But yeah, just as I say, not really a question, just more of a feeling as to, yeah, can we really take advantage of the capabilities of AI in insurance?
Yeah, it's no, I hear you. When you see that, you're kind of like, wow, this is sorry, my dog just came stampeding in here. Um,
Sorry.
when you when you see stuff like that, you think, wow, maybe this is kind of scary. I see where this is heading, and you
Yeah.
know, do I, what's going to happen to me? Um, I think the reality is that you can't just put your head in the sand, right? Like this is a wave that's happening, and it's all about how do we leverage and sort of harness these technologies for good. Um, why I like our industry and the insurance brokerage space in particular is that even with all this AI innovation, that the client relationship is so special. Like really this is an industry that's been built on those relationships where people have been working with the same insurance expert who's really like their risk manager, the person who can look around corners and help them think through these challenges for many years. And so
Mm.
even if behind the scenes, that person is leveraging tons of artificial intelligence to process documents, understand data, and deliver things quickly, they still want that expert to, actually give them recommendations and give them advice. And so I don't see that going away for a really long time.
Yeah, yeah, 100% agree. I often think, when it comes to if we're talking about claims, for example, in the insurance process, small claims, large claims, it's almost a question of the more we adopt AI, it's the question of when is it the right time to introduce the human being as part of using the claims process as an example. Um, but yeah, I mean, relationships are just so fundamental to it, and I think yeah, we could probably talk about this for another half an hour or so. So I'm conscious of your time, Gordon, but one of the things I wanted to unpack from a Newfront perspective was your culture. Again, the scale, correct me if I'm wrong, 700 plus employees in 7 years. We actually had a guest on this series, CTO Shepherd. I don't know if you know Mo, but
Yeah.
he was talking about culture, and he mentioned one of their core values was along the lines of crossing the aisle, and it's really that kind of you're smiling there, so I think
Yeah.
the kind of intersection of insurance product and engineering people, and then there's that the way he described it was I loved it, the metal in between, but you're crossing the aisle to really bring all of those people together so you can effectively raise your hand and ask the really simplest, obvious question to what an insurance person might be, but not from an engineering perspective, and vice versa. I was really interested to know when you started out with your co-founders, what that core cultural value was for you guys that you believe would make Newfront a success and was something to build upon. What was it that value I just mentioned, or? But yeah.
Yeah. It's I mean, I love I'll have to listen to the podcast with Mo. I'm a big fan. I'm actually an investor in Shepherd.
Ah.
Really like what they're doing. Um, it's funny. There's some really nice parallels there. So
Mm.
one of our core values is focus on people, and it really comes from exactly what you just described, right? This idea of how are you bringing together insurance experts with the technologists and helping them, speak the same language, helping them get on the same page and start pulling in the same direction. We actually have a tradition on our product and engineering teams where we call it crossing the aisle. And it's because our first office, we just had 2 rows of desks. There was tech on one side and insurance and operations on the other. And
Mm.
so if someone had a question, you could just like swivel your chair and cross that aisle and say, hey, I have a question about how this works in the product, and you go help them. Um, it's a little different now with, people joining all across the US and all over the world
Yeah.
and, in a remote Zoom environment, but it still works pretty well. So every time a new engineer joins the team, that person spends time shadowing account managers or producers and just seeing what is a day in the life like, kind of being a fly on the wall. And I think some of our best product improvements, I mean, small, quality of life things, that stuff that really adds up, come from those sessions, because you realize, wait, every time you do that, you have to click 4 different times. I can get rid of that step entirely. And so that's how you get that good partnership and get people working together.
Nice. I guess probably you've answered that question, but as you've perfectly put it there, when you're in the Bay Area and you've got your office and people can get up from their desk and walk across, but then you scale to 700 plus people across the US, and everyone's effectively fully remote. I mean, maintaining that type of culture, it must be very challenging to do so and still maintain those values. But by the sounds of it, you've done a great job of it.
It's definitely a big focus, and we're not fully remote. So we absolutely have offices we have several in the Bay Area. We have an office in Irvine, Seattle, Chicago, New York, Boston. And I think a lot of those, the newer offices are actually the ones that have the best in-person culture, because they're like, hey, I was the first hire in Chicago, and now we have this like awesome space. But it's definitely a challenge as we scale. Something that it keeps me up at night, to be honest, because I just worry that you lose some of that secret sauce that you had early on when you're all in the same room. And so finding ways during even the interview process or the onboarding process to maintain that culture is so important.
And what's been one of the things that's worked for you? Is it, you think it's being more hands-on as a CTO? You think it's getting around the offices across the US? Like, what do you feel that it is that's kind of worked for you guys to maintain that culture?
I definitely think finding ways to get together in person, it helps, just kind of helps you have more of a relationship with people. Not have it be so task oriented or work oriented. I really think the key thing, though, has been part of every interview cycle. We have a dedicated values interviewer. So those are folks from across the company who've gone through a training where they've sort of been certified to interview folks on values and culture fit. And what's really cool about that is it means that you might be an engineer interviewing a Newfront, and you're talking to someone who works in claims, or you might be, interviewing as an account executive, and you're talking to a product manager. And so kind of early on in that process, you're realizing, wow, this is a pretty special company that's really different than anywhere else, and building some of those bonds across the company.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Gordon, just as a kind of finishing note, you guys are at Newfront, the whole team. There's a lot of exciting things, I'm sure, for 2024. But what does that look like for you, personally? What's your aspirations for the future? Is it, continuing to support more and more growth, more headcount, building out new products, IPOing? I don't know. What's the ideal next step for you guys?
Yeah, well, from a business perspective, we want to keep doing what we're doing, which is just continue to bring amazing insurance talent to Newfront, and help all of our clients be super successful, regardless of what's happening in the macro economy. I'm excited about what's happening with our product. I mean, really seeing some of these AI innovations get into our clients' hands. I mentioned the benefits assistant. We have a very cool contract review product that's currently in sort of a beta testing phase, but is already working really nicely. There's 3 or 4 other things where we really see how this is going to change the client experience, and clients who work with Newfront will have something they can't get anywhere else. And so getting more of this into our clients' hands, that's where I'm really focused.
Awesome. Well, look, thank you very much for coming on. I think that's a great note to finish it on. Good luck with the year ahead. And yeah, it's been great to have you.
Thanks, Gavin. Really appreciate it.